Yeah, so this week, annual event, we wait and in anticipation to see which one of our heroes makes it into the Hall of Fame, or at least people we follow throughout their career. And like Mike, it's getting to that point. Actually, it's been like at that point over like this last decade that guys getting into the Hall of Fame are actually guys that I've watched play either in person or I've seen on TV and stuff like that. But one person I actually didn't see play in person, but he did play. I've seen him play plenty of times because uh he was part of one of the biggest heartbreaks of our lives. The Yankees losing the 2001 World Series, and he was also part of one of my biggest heartbreaks, which we discussed on an earlier episode, the 2004 Boston Red Sox. And that person I'm talking about is Curt Schilling, who was actually the highest vote getter of this year's ballot, making 71% of the vote, which didn't reach the 75% required for election to the Hall of Fame. So how this Hall of Fame balloting works is that in order to get a Hall of Fame vote, you have to have been covering a team for 10 years, actually, or writing about baseball professionally for an accredited news source for 10 years, or you'd have to have been a member of the Baseball Writers Association of America for 10 years. And you get a ballot where they give you like a list of names of players who've either been on a ballot for several years, um, or just joined the ballot this year, and you get to choose 10. If you make less than 5% of the vote, you're after your first year, you're left off the ballot, and a player stays on the ballot for 10 years. So this has been Curt Schilling's 10th year. So since he was denied entry this year, he's been obviously denied entry over the past several years. He has stated that he would like to be taken off the ballot. And he said this statement: I'm at a point now where I don't want to go through this again. I made peace with this a long time ago in understanding who wielded the gavel, who made the judgment. You're talking about a group who is 85% white and 90% male, and they're lecturing me on diversity and racism and all the things that go with that. The writers who know me know the things they're writing aren't true, and yet they still write them. And what he's alluding to is what we actually talked about in a previous episode of the Black Seats about where we talked a little bit about Kershaw's uh political leanings, where he is actually like extremely right wing. He's had tweets that had to have been reported and removed from Twitter for being transphobic, homophobic, Islamophobic, racist,
Anti-science,
anti-science.
anti-science as well,
Yeah, and
anti-evolution.
yeah, and
Also, um, he was very, very condescending in 2001 to the people of New York City, and people just gloss over that. He was a real. Do you remember the interviews he did when they before and after they won the World Series? But disrespectful, like basically, because like, who lives in New York City? Very diverse people, right? So
yeah,
it was a very, very, and it was right after 9/11.
yeah. So and he was very supportive of Donald Trump and his administration. He showed up at MAGA rallies, he campaigned for Donald Trump, stuff like that. But what rubbed a lot of these writers the wrong way was, in light of like the riots at the U.S. Capitol, he was actually very supportive of the people who rioted and who stormed the Capitol building and took part in the anarchy that took place on January 6th. And a lot of writers actually requested tried to get their ballots back because they already voted for him. So what I'm gonna talk about here is Curt Schilling himself, and I'm also gonna talk about the whole voting process because I also discussed in a previous episode of the Black Seats when we discussed the life and career of Hank Aaron, where these people there's people that actually didn't vote for Hank Aaron. I think like when it comes to a certain thing like the Hall of Fame, it's like you're either a Hall of Famer or you're not. And what happens with the Hall of Fame a lot of times is they'll be like, oh, like this person's a Hall of Famer. Um, this person's a Hall of Famer, but they're not a first ballot Hall of Famer, so they won't vote for them on the first year. Or a lot of them would say like, well, I definitely know like a whole bunch of people are gonna vote for this guy, so let me use his spot. Use my vote instead of using it for him. I'm gonna use it for like another guy, and it's just astounding because up until Mariano Rivera a few years ago, nobody went in unanimously. Derek Jeter missed it by like 2 votes or 1 vote, I think, a unanimous selection. So the voting process is flawed. Um, and everybody brings up like the character clause in or the character of a player shouldn't be held against them. So it's kind of astounding because it's like, all right, so you're telling me if Mike Trout retired and he had like 500 home runs, 3,000 hits. Let's assume at some point he wins the World Series, but he like goes to a dog shelter and kills like 30 dogs. Like we're just supposed to ignore that. And apparently that's what a lot of these people are saying. But at the same time, they're talking about a lot of the lead up to the writing, and it's usually like the older writers and not really the younger writers, like holding PED uses, whether suspected PED uses, admitted PED uses, people who have tested positive for PED use, like they'll hold a lot of shit against them. But in my opinion, I feel like steroids is kind of like a character thing because it's something what it's something that you choose to do, and if you chose to do it after like 2005, after like the Mitchell report and they started testing for steroids, then shame on you. You shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. So that's the case against like Alex Rodriguez, Manny Ramirez, etc., etc. Um, but at the same time, it's like there's a lot of players who've been suspected of steroid use that were put up great numbers. But Mike, you've seen the Mitchell report, right? Or you're aware
Yes,
of it?
and I've seen many. Yeah, I'm aware of it. And I know I've seen the reports about it and all of that. Yeah,
And it's like 200 names, and only like a handful of them were like all stars. And when I say all stars, I mean like guys that made like an all star game or two, and maybe
right.
like 1 to 5 of them were like superstars.
It's dudes trying to keep a fucking job, So when they're hurt and then they get threatened, they start, trying to. That's for the most part, a lot of them. A lot of the guys who got popped, right?
Yeah,
A
so
lot of them were just
it,
like,
it's very it's like a objective thing because they never really cared about steroids, and I always thought it's kind of weird that Bud Selig, he's in the Hall of Fame, but his claim to fame is bringing baseball back or weathering baseball back through the 1994 baseball strike. But one of
hmm,
the things that made baseball popular was because people started hitting like these outrageous amounts of home runs. So you're telling me the guy that kind of captained the ship for baseball to weather the storm, you put him into the Hall of Fame, and that's fine. Um, you kind of ignore how he got there. You kind of ignore the captain of the boat, but you don't ignore like the guys who were rowing, which were all of these guys doing all of these guys who were suspected of doing steroids. The Barry Bonds, the Mark McGuire's, the Sammy Sosa's, the Alex
Palmero.
Rodriguez's, Rafael Palmeiro, like all of these dudes. And it's another thing that Schilling used to bring up too, because his claim to fame was, oh, I had to pitch against all of these guys and I accomplished all this shit that I accomplished. The other thing with the voting process is, like I said, you had to have been covering baseball for 10 years, or you had to have been part of the Baseball Writers Association for 10 years. So let's put that in perspective, Mike.
Okay, I think I know where you're going with this.
So that means, like, if you just got a job writing baseball in 2010, only now you'd get a vote in 2021 or 2020. Um, do you think in 2010 going back, there were a lot of black people, black writers, Latino writers, um, women, uh, gay or trans writers? Like, do you think it was very diverse?
Me, I think that shit started. I think it was just pushed more so in the last decade. So I think going forward in the next 10 years, you're going to see a completely different class. Of ideas.
Yeah,
And what I thought you were going to bring up was that people were buddy friends with these people. You know,
yeah,
oh, like if you're a beat writer, you're friends with them, and you're gonna gloss over the imperfections, and you're just gonna go, but look at the numbers, look at the numbers.
yeah. I'm actually gonna bring that point
Um,
up in a second. That you
but
just brought up.
ironically, Curt Schilling brings that up. He brought that up. He goes, he brought it up in a way where he's kind of like pointing fingers at other people. He's like, well, they were, he said, look at ESPN. Like, I worked with them and they were the most not diverse. And this is, he worked there until almost 10 years ago, like 2014. It's like I've heard the most disgusting things from those people. They're not diverse and they're saying this stuff about me. And he's basically saying like, it's kind of like going back and forth. Like you say like one thing and then you say the other thing, so then it kind of like negates it, and then people just are like, all right, so like that's kind of what like that's like a Fox News because I see Fox News as a Fox News move where like you say one thing and then you bring something else up there and then it negates it, and you're just like, all right, so what's your point? I don't have a point. I'm just bringing up two different things. That's kind of like
Yeah.
the thing.
So, like
It makes
my
sense a
point in
little bit.
bringing that up was that, probably, if you had to have been covering baseball for 10 years, obviously with like the Oscars and all these different type of things where all of a sudden now, the trendy thing to do now is now try to become representative, whereas back then they weren't trying to do that. Sure, they had your, handful of diverse writers and thus diverse voters, but for the grand scheme of things, things were voted on by straight white guys, and a lot of them were older and from that, like, 50s, 60s, and 70s generation. Where the things that Kurt Schilling does or says, you could kind of be like, oh well, it's bad, but you kind of gotta ignore that. Like I have to ignore it. Like I gotta look at what he accomplished on the field, and it's just kind of like, why? It's like, all right, so you're telling me if a guy hit like 600 home runs and had 3,000 hits, but he like murdered, and you could say like he did it cleanly, and he won like 2 World Series, but he like murdered his like family. He like Chris Benoit his family. You're telling me you could ignore that shit
I'm with you.
because he could accomplish all this stuff on he accomplished all this stuff on a baseball field? Like, what are you gonna do? Have his Hall of Fame ceremony be satellite broadcast from like Rikers? Like, it's crazy, and that's what these guys are saying because this caused a stir last night, yesterday. Bob Ryan, Bob Ryan, right?
Bob Ryan, he's still around?
Exactly.
Jesus
And guess
fucking
what?
Christ.
He has a Hall of Fame vote. He says,
Yeah.
in response to Curt Schilling basically lambasting the writers, and he's one of these white writers that I guess Curt Schilling was put on blast, and he felt some type of way. So he says, "Hey Kurt, what Hall of Famer said 12 Swiss Jewish bankers ruled the world? The last 8 US presidents were traitors, and AIDS was hatched in a Maryland lab in order to kill gays and blacks and still got 95.82% of the vote." The answer, Steve Carlton. P.S. I voted for him and for you. And it's like,
Okay.
what was your point? Like, you voted for two god awful people to get into the Hall of Fame?
So he actually like backspace. Oh shit. Let me copy and paste. I fucked that up. Like he actually did that's a long tweet.
And it's funny because it's still up. Like, he ain't even like
I
deleted
thought he was gonna
it.
insult him.
And he got ratioed. Like, I mean, it's crazy. Um, I actually not by a lot, but like in response to that, I said, "I'm sorry, dog, but if Kurt Schilling said half the shit, Schilling
Oh,
or apparently Steve Carlton said, I wouldn't vote for any of them for the Hall of Fame."
all right. So now you're gonna bring up it's a morality clause, is what they call it. Morality clause.
Well, morality or character clause. That's the character
So
clause.
basically,
The character clause is the one that's kept Shoeless
Pete
Joe
Rose.
Jackson, Pete Rose, like
Oh,
those
yeah, Pete
people out of
Rose.
Hall
Yeah.
of Fame. Like, all right, that's where character is called into question. Like, okay, but like being a decent human being isn't.
All right, so we're talking about someone's career, and then Curt Schilling, he was a Philly, right? He was in the early '90s, and he had a long career. But let's talk about way back. We're gonna. I'm afraid I don't want to bring this up because I know it's a long time ago, but way back in early January 2021, Curt Schilling said to sit back and watch folks start a confrontation for what matters, the rights, insurrection. He was pro-insurrection. That's all I'm saying. 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. All
Yeah.
right. So tell this guy to shut the fuck up. Good
Mm.
lord.
Yeah,
You know
and
what I mean?
Mike, you brought up the thing where it's like these guys that were voting people like they were buddy with, right? So Jim Rice, also a guy made his career in Boston. Kurt Schilling played in Boston. Obviously, not as long as Jim Rice. Jim Rice spent his whole career with the Red Sox. So I said about these Hall of Fame voters, I said this is the same voting group that kept Jim Rice, a dude that saved a child during a game in uniform, out of the Hall of Fame until his last year on the ballot because he hated talking to the media. And I actually have the picture. It's a famous picture of him carrying a kid. I think a foul ball hit a kid in left field where he was playing, and he rushed into the stands and carried the kid into the trainer's room so he could get medical attention. He had some great stats. He won the AL MVP in 1978. Like, he was a Hall of Famer, and they kept him out because he had a very adversarial relationship with the media. So it's just, this whole thing is just about the voting process and how it kind of like screwed a lot of people, but I don't think it screwed Curt Schilling. And then the other thing with Curt Schilling, me, all biases aside, I don't even think I personally would vote Curt Schilling into the Hall of Fame. Like, I've even said for years, I personally wouldn't vote Pete Rose into the Hall of Fame, not because he's gambling. I just thought like he's the all-time hit leader because he played forever. Like, the man played from like 19.
Well, he was a he was a player coach. Like come on.
He played
No,
from like
Devin, but like
19.
no, I would.
He played from like
Yeah, 60.
1963 to like 1986. The man played like almost 30 years. Like,
Then he didn't play
um,
for a couple years though because he was in the he was like a coach and then he went back out and he started playing again. But I'm gonna say this: I know people are gonna be like, "Why are you talking about sports?" Oh yeah, you're talking about who cares about the Hall of Fame? He has political aspirations. That's why we have to bring this up, right?
who Pete
He
Rose?
has aspirations to be in Congress. No, Curt Schilling.
Perhaps, yeah, could be.
He openly is saying it. He still lives in Massachusetts, um, but he's from like Arizona, so he would be for Arizona. Arizona, you don't have to live there. There's no like, there's you don't have to live there for a certain amount of time uh, to run. Um, so it's more than just a public figure. It's more than just sports. If someone's going to try, as we can see, that people don't care about someone storming, not someone, but an army of people storming, the institution. You know, this guy. Oh, I know Curt Schilling. I'll vote for him. Boom. I know this guy. Yeah. And then you see outrageous shit become a meme, which he's retweeted so many memes. You become a meme. Oh, Bernie Sanders now would probably win presidency if he because of the meme. Oh yeah, I know that guy. He's a funny old man. Let's vote for him.
Yeah,
It's like
and I
people are
think
just
also the Hall of Fame, because that's all they're gonna say, like Hall of Famer Curt Schilling. It's like Tuberville from Alabama. He won a Senate seat, and he's like an idiot. But back to Curt
mm,
Schilling's like stats. The thing people hold against Andy Pettit from him being in the Hall of Fame. Andy Pettit, I think in 2002, he had an elbow injury and he used HGH in order to recover quickly. And this was before they tested for it. This is before the shit was illegal. So, and he was actually giving it to one of the snitches from the congressional hearings and the Mitchell Report, Brian McNamee, who was Roger Clemens'
mm,
trainer, and that's how Roger Clemens and his family, because Roger Clemens' wife was also involved in the whole thing. But the HGH thing is like, if you ignore the fact that Curt Schilling is a walk-in shit bucket, which is what I tweeted. Andy Pettit won 40 more games in fewer seasons, and he only lost 7 more games than Curt Schilling. He won 2 more World Series, and he pitched in 3 more World Series than Curt Schilling did. And I know as of his retirement, I'm not sure if he still is. I think he still is, but he was the all-time leader in postseason wins for a pitcher. And they didn't vote for him for the Hall of Fame because he did HGH once, and that's like the
mm,
only black stain on his career. And my thing is the absurdity of it all. Curt Schilling, the voting, everything. It just doesn't make sense because it's like they're basically saying a dude could be debated as to whether or not he's a Hall of Famer if he's a neo-Nazi, anti-gay church member and he won 200 games and a couple of like big playoff games. But if a cool, non-controversial dude that won like 270 games, but did like HGH once to heal an injury or something like that when it was I wouldn't say legal, but it was like frowned upon. You can't vote for that guy. So it's a big hypocritical thing, and I think it's one of the things, especially when baseball is trying to do this thing where they're trying to be like popular. And that's why I kind of say, like, if you watch like the NBA and like their following, it's like a young group of just like stat nerds, and they're annoying as hell. And a lot of their shit gets like stupid. I'm not gonna get into that because it's a baseball show, but I think if you switch
mhm.
like if baseball started to get that kind of like crowd and like you moved away from like the Bob Ryans of the world and you kind of like switch to like the fan graphs and the young guys writing about baseball, that's where baseball would start to thrive. But somebody like Kurt Schilling, I don't think they're Hall of Fame, and I don't think, like, to me it's like they're kind of on the fence. And when you kind of have the character that he is, where he's you know anti-Muslim, anti-gay, anti-trans, racist towards immigrants and shit like that, like you're making a case for yourself not to be a Hall of Famer. Um and I think the other thing I also tweeted, I was like, if anything, the fact that people like Kurt Schilling, and I talk about him a lot on the show, Hater from the Milwaukee Brewers, where it's like he said a whole bunch of racist shit in high school, but he gets like applauded when he like returns, even though there's no kind of like serious change in his life as to his change in attitude and stuff like that. To me, I think baseball is just breeding like a whole new generation of just like racist assholes. So I think when you start punishing people like Curt Schilling and you start punishing people like Hater or any of these other dudes where like either they're saying things online that are insensitive or they've done things in the past insensitive but they never atone for them, it'll breed a better generation of baseball players, because that's another thing I think would have to do with the popularity of the sport. Like these guys got to come in here and like you can't be a racist smug asshole and just assume like a fan base is going to be built around you. Like we're in this progressive generation where like stuff like that we don't want. And it's just not like you being you. And that's the other thing. Like it's like, oh well, that's just him. Like, no, dude, like you're a jerk. Like, and if you've accomplished all of these great things on a baseball field, like you should carry yourself with a sense of class. Like Donald Trump never carried himself with a sense of class.
Good
And
segue. Can I say so? Trump, he didn't go to the inauguration, right?
no,
Schilling shits on MLB, shits on the Hall of Fame, and people like him will shit on it and say it's not worth it. I don't want to be there. Fuck it. I don't want to be. I don't want to be anything. I don't want. It's bullshit anyway. I don't want to be a part of it. So let's leave. Let's drain the swamp. Like, let's leave this. Who cares? That's the whole thing. Because you it's that old advertisement of the Australian advertisement of the guy who comes in there and he's like drunk, he gets kicked out of the party, and you see him later on in the outskirts crying because he's like drunk and stuff. You're gonna get kicked out of the party because the party guests don't like you anymore. You're
yeah,
not welcome anymore.
mm-hmm.
So basically, so you're gonna shit on. So you want to be a part of a thing? Oh, so Curt Schilling goes, oh, I don't take me off the ballot. I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want to be involved in this anymore. Because why? Because you're not welcome.
Yeah, and
So
it's
now
like
let me first say I'm not there. I don't want
yeah,
to be there anymore.
yeah, and you can't separate the person from the stats. I mean, we celebrate Hank Aaron because Hank Aaron accomplished great things on a baseball field, and he was a stand-up person off the field. Like nobody, except for like the few assholes when Hank Aaron went on the ballot for the Hall of Fame. The like few that tried to be like detractors, but overall, like you've seen the amount of love like he got when he retired. You've seen like the amount of love Ken Griffey got. All of these guys. Like I think, like I know A-Rod won't ever get in, but he still seems like a cool dude. But people hate him.
Yeah,
Like
I think he's happy being in Hollywood.
yeah.
He's fine. He's happy.
I
I mean,
don't.
I was attacking. All that energy was towards Schilling and the like. Okay, everything else is positive. It was just I had to get that out. I had to get that out on people like Schilling because like it's like you shit on a thing, like a something we all covet that we're all grown up loving MLB and then like the Hall of Fame. Cooperstown is like the whole like a holy place to go for baseball fans. And you go, oh, I don't want to be in it anymore. Take me off the ballot. Things change. Hey, man, things change, brother. You're obsolete almost.
Yeah, and
That makes sense.
it's like, oh, I don't care.
No,
I want to be off the ballot. Da, da,
you do
da.
care.
And all right, yeah, I know he does. And shame on
But
the
why me?
writers. Like the fact that 71% of them was like, all right, like I don't care that
Yeah.
Curt Schilling is like, a walking turd bucket, but like I'm gonna vote for him
But the
anyway.
writers suck now too, though.
They
The
do.
writers suck. The next generation. The next generations are all about just start like kind of like stirring the shit. They're kind of like the ones who like just to say something and then like watch. Correct me, do you agree or not? Where like they kind of like put something out there and then they want to see like the reaction. It's very reactionary,
Yeah.
which is not healthy. That's not healthy, right? That's not journalism.